Just like that, we're going. I'm here today at my longtime friend and one-time client, and I don't even know if you knew, but I always viewed you as a bit of a mentor. I never had a mentor outside of my dad until I met you, and it was I always used to love coming to visit you at the Wellness Corp, and you'd always give me advice, and it would be an hour outside of what we were there to discuss, I really always appreciated that. So I'm here today in your workshop, and I'm just setting the tone. I'm here today in the workshop, and I want to talk to you about the Wellness Corp and the charity that you have helped to raise and change things for lives in Guatemala. So that being said, I guess we'll just start from the reason I met you originally is the Wellness Corporation.
Right.
So can you start with tell a little bit about what the Wellness Corporation was?
Yep.
What did the company do?
The Wellness Corporation was a company that set up counseling programs, otherwise known as EAP, Employee Assistance Programs, in corporations, schools, colleges, regionally. I mainly worked in the Northeast region, and started the company by myself, and I had a beeper on, and I was a nurse, so I was still working 3 to 11 while I was technically on call 24/7 for this company. And it was 2 years before I landed an account, and I could cut my hours back from nursing. And then 2 years after that, I was able to quit nursing totally and concentrate on that.
How did you know about what an EAP was or what it was doing? Was it connected to nursing? Was it a need that you saw? Or
Well, yeah, because I was nursing mainly in the specialty fields, sort of the emergency rooms and burn units, intensive care units, and I always saw the after effects of human beings' interactions that didn't work out. Let's say they were poor relationships, and they were batterings or homicides or someone took their own life or whatever.
Stuff that most people don't see.
That's right. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I worked in a detox, Skid Row detox for 4 years. And I just said that there has to be something better. So I heard about this employee assistance program, and I said, well, let me check that out. And so in getting my undergraduate degree, I did an internship at an employee assistance program in Worcester, and I learned the nuts and bolts of what it was. And I knew that I would come back. I would have to get a graduate degree because you couldn't. Your credibility was with your graduate degree. So I ended up going to Minnesota with my new wife, and went into their MPH program. But the most important thing was I interned with Hazelden's EAP program, which was the largest in the world. They had the contract with the NFL, et cetera. So I came back to Worcester in 1984. And we had our first child, and we bought a little house, and I was only back maybe 6 weeks. It was quite a year because my father had passed away, and it was that year that I went by a roadside a yard sale, and I picked up a desk and a chair, and I rented a small little office and put employee assistance services on the outside of the door, and that was the beginning. And then and that grew into into a business that was doing about $5 million and had 40 employees after 30 years. So
what would you, when it was just you with the shingle, what would you sell as the employee assistance?
I would sell. Your employees all have human problems. They have issues that they come in to work with every day. For a good part of your population, they can hide it, stuff it, put it aside, and still do the work. But there's going to be at least 10% of your population at any given day that what's going on in their personal life is going to hamper their ability to perform.
Is it as low as 10, you think?
It's
probably, or is that just a number they swallow?
That's a number that it's actually probably closer to 25.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. And not knowing.
I mean,
now,
life is life. It's not like it doesn't actually leave when you walk in the building. I mean, if there's something bothering you, it's bothering you.
That's right. It could be your kids. It could be your marriage. It could be just, you hate your job, whatever it is. But
Christmas.
Christmas.
There's a lot of pressure with a lot of different things that some people find great joy in. Some people find terror or pressure. You never know what it is because everyone's different.
That's right. And Christmas is tough for me. And my wife died 5 years ago, but Christmas, I'm not the Grinch, but this is the first year I bought a tree. So it takes a while. But so that's how I would sell the product. And the product they paid per employee per month. So it was a great system because you got a check for, let's say, Harvard was one of my accounts, and there's 14,000 employees at Harvard. So I would get so much per employee per month, whether they use the program or not.
Right. So just so that it's an asset to them.
It's an asset. So it's like an insurance check would come into my business. And then I just rolled it back into the company and kept the company growing. And so that went on for a good while, and I had my third child, and I found that I was I wanted to now give back. I felt I came from a pretty rough side of the tracks, as they say. I grew up in Somerville before Somerville was sort of the mecca that it is today. But it was really blue collar. Howie Winters and the gang were still very much. I used to play basketball actually with Howie Winters' son. I mean, so it was a tough place to grow up. And I left when I was 16, went into the Navy. Very early, 17 years old, during the Vietnam era. And so when I came out, I had a lot of tough times in the Navy because I had problems with authority, and spent some break time, which is, I think, for me, it was a wonderful experience to be behind bars and to look out, and because I could see the street, and I swore that once I got out, I would never come back in again.
Yeah.
So that's the positive of that.
One of those eye-opening times in life where you're kind of you're behind bars, but because it's the brig, it's not. It's not as bad as it could be, but you can see it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. But you can see people, walking along the street hand in hand, and you're saying, I can't go anywhere. And so after that ended, I got a general discharge. So with the GI Bill, I was lucky. I got a letter from the Somerville Hospital School of Nursing, and they asked me if I wanted to attend. They were looking for male nurses, and I said, well, I didn't do too well in high school, but I'll give it a shot. And they accepted me, and that really turned my life around.
That's really cool because that's interesting too. I would imagine that in the time that you went to nursing school, you probably weren't 50-50 male female in the class, right? No, it was very different.
4 of us males, and there was 37 females.
Yeah, so, I'd imagine. So times have changed, but nursing's still a female dominated.
That's right. Most males now that go into nursing go into anesthesiology. They become a nurse anesthetist. For 2 reasons. Number one, the money.
Yeah.
They make a lot more money than a floor nurse. And males, generally speaking, don't like to do nursing on the floor because it's very hard work. It's always been looked upon as a female's job. I never minded it. I enjoyed floor nursing when I did, but the whole thing of taking care of sick people after the fact is what really I said that there had to be a better way.
Do you think that's part of what drove you to be a nurse too, or kept you interested through it? Where you can't take male female out of it, but they say in general, if we're really talking general terms, more females are nurses because of that nurturing side to women. That it's not that men can't have it; it's just that it's more dominant in women than men, right? So, but you've always it's been a driving force in your life, and we'll get to it. But caring for others. So, do you think you just had an inclination that was a good beginning?
Yes. So my mother was a nurse, though she also was an alcoholic, and so which was very common for nurses. Her mother was a nurse, and she was an alcoholic. I mean,
well, the people like a nurse, a police officer, a fireman. I mean, those professions see the worst that the world has to offer.
That's right.
And so that's hard to do. We put a lot of pressure on. Luckily, we're pretty supportive of nurses, at least it seems like, but like police officers get a lot of undue pressure because of some bad ones, where most of them are good people.
Absolutely.
But I think that when you've got the suburban mom or dad, mouthing off about a police officer. They don't understand the
That's
4 deaths they saw that week, and then the
That's right.
horrific car accident with a kid in it, and
That's right.
like, and nurses see those same things when they arrive from the scene to the
That's
hospital.
right.
You know, and I think a lot of us, me included, are just lucky that we don't see that. You know, my daily life is filled with a lot of good stuff.
That's right. Yeah, you're
So the
really,
weight, you gotta
most
take it
people are
home.
insulated from that reality, and that's why there's a camaraderie between firemen, nurses, and policemen.
Yes.
I mean it's a camaraderie that only they understand.
Right.
And,
It's because you can get it, right?
That's right. That's right. And one night I was on the 3 to 11 shift, and my job was at that point was psych nursing. So our job was, if somebody came in that was really out of sorts or needed to be go to a state hospital, they would come in and we would do the assessment. We were also brought in when a SIDS death was brought in, and we would have to sit with the mother and father, knowing that their child had just passed away.
My stomach just turned.
Yeah, it's sad, and then I think what really made me leave the field was one evening, a 16-year-old girl came in. She was in a fight with her best friend, and her best friend cut her throat with a Coke bottle, and she was dead.
Jesus.
And so I went into the paddy wagon to see her, and it was just surreal to see this, beautiful 16-year-old with her eyes open and with this gaping hole in her neck, and I just said, I got to get out of this field. I can't.
Life forever altered at
That's
16.
Right. That's right. And the other person in the families, so I just said that there's got to be a better way. So it wasn't long after that I found EAP, and then I headed out to Minnesota to get the graduate degree, and then and start. But nursing, it teaches you a lot about life, a lot about yourself, but it also teaches what you don't want to do.
Yeah. I can't imagine the education you get and the things that you see.
Right.
And so when you do start the Wellness Corp, and you're servicing Harvard, but if it's still a one-man show, like what is the service that you mentioned, a beeper? Are they calling you literally in the beginning?
Yeah, we gave up beepers after a while because they wanted more immediate attention. So we have a call center, and the call center would be 7 or 8 people, and they'd be taking calls from all over the country because we took care of their staff, all the professors, and you get a call like my name is so-and-so, do you know who I am? And of course the poor call worker doesn't know that this guy is the biggest paleontologist in the world, and he'll have a particular personal problem, and he'll want service, and he happens to be on vacation in California, and so we would plug them into a psychologist within 48 hours wherever they were.
Okay.
And this happened around the world. We had a Converse employee who was murdered in Taiwan, and so again, so the company became. You needed more staff to service more people, and once you land a Harvard or a B or a Brown or a Yale, and we had all those accounts, you sort of your standards are pretty high, and so it just grew from that.
Yeah, the standards got to be high, but they don't hand you the answer, right? So you had to tell me a little bit, or take me through. So you're shuffling for 2 years trying to get an account. You're kind of a lone wolf, and then you land a Harvard or a Brown. You land something that's now going to pay the bills, but you have to service it.
Right.
So at that point, are you like scrambling to form these relationships and how to make this network where you can connect people? Or I mean, it couldn't have happened overnight.
No. Harvard took. I didn't land Harvard until I was in the business 10 or 11 years. So the first accounts are usually 50 employee companies, or 75, and those you just service them to death. So if they call, you make sure they have an appointment. I always made sure that we never had a prompt system, so they were always answered live. So when a person is feeling down and out, and they have the courage to pick up a phone, they don't want to hear a prompt system.
Right.
They want to hear a live person. So we did that right until I sold my company.
Was that normal?
That was not normal. Most EAPs had prompt systems that got to my
So that's
size.
kind of a difference maker for.
That was a big difference maker, yeah. And we also guaranteed that they would have a PhD level clinician within 48 hours. That was also not a standard in the field. And so we did little things like that made, in other words, I knew how hard it was to open up and to talk to somebody. So my objective when I started the company was to take all the obstacles out of the way of a person. In other words, there's no copay. There's no, it's free. If your company buys the program, it's free. And so we took all the obstacles out of the way. So a live person answered the phone. We got you seen real quick. And we checked up to make sure that person saw you within 48 hours. So that was another loop in the system. And so when you're doing that kind of stuff, it's very labor intensive. So you have to hire more people. So I never just, made money and just salted it away. I just had to really keep dumping it back into the company because as it grew, it became, I needed more labor to take care of those accounts.
Sure. But those accounts were taken care of because of that labor. It was a self-serving prophecy kind of thing where the bigger you got, but the more you had to service.
Right. And it would often be, somebody would say, like a Harvard would say, well, we really like you, James, and, we've checked all of your accounts, but what's it going to be like when you bring on Harvard? Because we're Harvard, and and we have a pretty high standards, and so you always were proving yourself. And the beauty of getting a tough account is that it makes your company better.
Yeah,
it's like anything else. It makes everything rises.
Yep.
And so Harvard led to Brown, led to Yale, and so we actually at one point had more colleges than any other EAP in the country. And that's really what sold the company when I did have to sell it after my wife got sick. It was a saleable company because not only that, we got into student assistance programs. So we got into student assistance, and we had so many colleges. In colleges, they're kind of fail-safe. They don't get hit by recessions. Though I hear that smaller colleges are closing now, but colleges figure out a way, particularly the Ivy Leagues. And they pay on time and all that kind of stuff. So
they work like a machine.
That's right.
As far as payments and everything go. We have higher ed clients too, and they're very reliable.
They're very reliable. And when you have a small business, it's important that you figure out pretty soon who's going to pay you on time. And who
you really do.
Yeah.
You really do. And you figure out who will definitely pay, but they might pay 6 months late religiously.
Exactly. And that was the state. Any contract we have with the state or with the prison system, you got your money, but you got it on their time. And so we just stopped going after state contracts because it just wasn't worth it for us. So, but it provided a great living for me, and I was able to send all three of my kids. They went to good colleges. My last son went to Tufts, and so I was so fortunate. But when the kids got older and things were going pretty well, and I wasn't looking at the checkbook to see how things were going, I decided that it was time to give back, and so I wrote a piece. It was an editorial in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, and I said, if all small business owners out there took on one nonprofit, and they just gave them not so much money, but technical assistance, mentorship, whatever.
Help them be better.
Because if you run I've been on many boards of nonprofits, and if they run more like a business, they're going to do better.
Sure.
And so I wrote this, and I put my name and number in there, and I was just waiting for the phone to ring. I never got a call. Not one business called me, and I said, well, you're going to have to just do this on your own.
Wow.
And so,
do you still have that, the letter or the article?
I'm sure it's in one of my computers someplace. So I was at, I had a Native American friend of mine, and we did a sweat together. I've done several of sweats. They're very spiritual.
Yes.
And so he said, you want to meet this guy. He's from Guatemala. He escaped the death squads in the early 80s, and he's in Vermont now. He is a refugee on a priory up there with his 4 children. They're all grown now and gone, but I think he wants to go back to Guatemala and build a midwife center. And I said, well, I'll meet him, and so I did. He was giving a talk. His English was very poor. His wife's was a little bit better, and they were giving a talk at Harvard about their wish that they could have, because many women were dying of childbirth up in the Western Highlands of Guatemala. And so I met with him. I met with his wife. I saw some pictures. And the next time, 2 weeks later, we flew to Guatemala. And what was interesting is that he was still a refugee status. So when we flew into Mexico City, They kept him under armed guard
No
for
kidding.
5 hours while we had a layover.
Wow.
Because he was still under refugee status. So we get to Guatemala, and then the Western Highlands is another 5 hours by vehicle to get up there. And so I met with the midwives, and I came back, and in 2 years had about 3, I think, big auctions and raised about $300,000 total. And in 2001, we had our 2002 we had our opening, so just recently we had our 1,000th birth there, and the building was designed so it has actually a sweat inside. So,
oh yeah,
because that's
I didn't know that part.
That's very traditional. That after birth, the midwife will take the mother without the baby, of course, and bring her into a sweat, like a sweat lodge.
Well, it's really healthy and helps with inflammation and everything that the mother's going through after giving birth.
And it gets the lactation going and all that kind of stuff. So we have actually a sweat lodge built inside the facility. So the clinic has been doing very well, and when my wife passed away, in her honor, I bought a Land Rover. There was only 2 in all of Guatemala, and I got one of them. And in the back of the Land Rover is a picture of my wife. And so now we're able to reach higher elevations, which we couldn't before. It was just too difficult to reach during the rainy season. It was impossible.
Yeah, I've never been, but I've seen all the photos and stuff from you, and the terrain is clearly not that easy to get around,
Right,
and it's not like it's the road systems we have here or any of that.
That's right.
And the facility itself, we'll link to it in the podcast so people can see what we're talking about. But it's a beautiful facility. I'm looking at a picture of it right now over your shoulder. It's got to have made not just a difference in the safe birthing of children, but it's got to have changed the village. I mean, it's like having a downtown when you didn't. It's having this almost like a beacon. Right. That change can happen, that things can improve.
Right.
I mean, I'm guessing from the outside.
No, it was. And we did a video, and we have a website, and there's a video on the website that everybody should watch. And it's all translated. They call Spanish the conqueror's language. So many speak it out of necessity, but there are many women up in the highlands that don't even speak Spanish. They all speak their own native dialect of it's MAM. M-A-M is a very guttural dialect, and there are 7 dialects, and they're all dying out, unfortunately, because they're not taught in schools anymore. But their dream was to have a facility. They never imagined that it would look like this, but because when they went to a local hospital with a woman that was having difficulty, they were shunned. They weren't let in the room. They weren't let in the maternity area.
Was that societal?
That's very societal. So Guatemala is doing today to Mayan people what we did to Native Americans in the early 1900s. So it is they are very much discriminated against, and they have very little power, and they're extremely poor. The average income for Guatemalan, a Mayan person in the highlands is about $4 a day. So the women all make $20 to $30 a week, and they $20 to $50 a week, depending on how many hours they work. And so we now have 6 midwives that work 24/7. So there's always someone, because it's a way.
So it's a real facility. I mean, there's coverage, because births don't happen 9 to 5, right?
That's right. And we have a pharmacia. So in many of the midwives, they know herbal medicine, and so they grow their own herbal medicine. So every woman that comes in leaves with lots of herbal medicines, and they leave with some clothing for the child and some protein for at least the first month of the child's life.
That's great. But it's not just having the herbal medicine or the clothing. A lot of that is the fabric of their community, right? They have the colorful fabric and the clothing, and the herbal medicine is cultural, right? It's not purely medicinal, or even if it is medicinal, it's part of the culture that's come along with them. So that it's important in preserving that as well, too, right? Is that correct?
That's right, because our objective was, and sounds kind of strange, but they didn't really trust us for at least 2 years. I mean, the building was going up, and they still were wondering why these gringos were building a building up here to help us. So what were they going to take away? How is it going to run? Because most NGOs, when they go into an area, they say, look, we know better. It's our way or the highway. Well, if you read literature now, people are now listening to the elders because the elders really have the answers. And it's not cut and dry. It's a very complicated answer. And so after 2 years, to prove that we had nothing, we legally turned the building over to them. They own the building. And so they have their meetings on a monthly basis, and we Skype through on their meetings. And I may have an idea for something, and they don't like it. And so the commission, or it's not the commission, it's the elders, they make the decisions. And it's their decision.
Yeah.
If I don't like it, that's too bad. They made the decision to do something, and that's it. So
it's autonomy, right? Some independence.
Autonomy. It's total autonomy.
Have you picked up on some mom? So when you are Skyping in, how are you communicating and putting your ideas out?
No, I can only, my Spanish is awful. And so the nurse that I'm on the call with, Nikki.
I know Nikki.
Nikki May. Yeah, she speaks Spanish.
She's great.
And so it's interpreted. I can understand more than I can speak it. And so I get a gist of what's going on. They never speak mom, only together. But on the calls, it's always Spanish.
So is their Spanish really? Are they really proficient, or is it like? Do you think there's a breakdown? Like, is it sometimes tough to get ideas across to go from English to Spanish, and then for their Spanish?
No, because their Spanish is very good because they learned it as a second language, and so they speak it slowly. It's not a Puerto Rican type of Spanish.
Yeah.
It's a very slow, methodical Spanish. So it's really, if you're going to learn Spanish, there's schools up there, and I've just never taken the 2 months to do an immersion program. I've always thought I'd have the time, but I just never have. And so it doesn't, because Nikki's around, and we now have 2 or 3 people on the board that can speak Spanish. It's not necessary for me to speak Spanish. So we just had a fundraiser just a couple of weeks ago at a house in Newton, and we sold weavings. I ran the silent auction, and I do a lot of photography, so I frame pictures and bring them, and we raised about $15,000 for that.
Oh, wow.
Day. Yeah. So they need about $40,000 a year to operate with salaries and everything. And,
okay.
And they are now.
That's with the pharmacy. That's with everything.
That's with everything. And now they're providing it themselves because they charge a few quetzales. A quetzal is like $0.00. And so for a woman to come in for a consult, or for we actually have them. Do ultrasounds. We have ultrasound machines there, which the local hospital doesn't even have.
I was going to say, that's got to be pretty mind-blowing to see one.
So if a woman comes in for an ultrasound, she'll leave with a picture of her baby, and it'll cost her, let's say, 5 quetzales, which is less than $1. And so the midwives have been able to bring in half of the overhead of the clinic, and they're at about 50%. Last year was 40%. So our fundraising has gotten less and less, and much less work to do. It's
really a great thing. It's amazing. And aside from the Skype meetings and board meetings, you still go there every year, right?
I try and go every year. And
what are you doing while you're there? Well, did it kind of rekindle nursing? Are you hands-on?
If there's a bodega is when they announce over the radio that at the Mom Center that there'll be an open clinic for anybody. It's free. So people will come, and I'll put on my nurse's cap. I still have my license, and I'll see the men. And if Nikki's with me, another woman, she'll see the woman.
Sure.
And usually the diseases, the issues that they have coming in are worms, malnutrition, severe headache. This one man, he carries bundles of wood up and down the mountain every day, and he puts a strap across his head to carry the bundles on his back. And I, through an interpreter, I said, "What's your primary problem?" He says, "I have the headache all the time." and so he left with a whole huge bottle of ibuprofen. I mean, that's all I could do for him.
Right.
I mean, there really wasn't much, but then the rest of the time I'm photographing. I'm just walking around with the camera, and I have one of the elders. introduce me before I do any picture taking, because Mayan people do not like having their picture taken. They feel that it's taking something from their soul. So you always ask. You never take something, even if I'm in the car. I don't do drive-bys because it just
out of respect.
It shows disrespect. So I was able to get inside the homes, which is really wonderful. And a couple of the pictures you see in this room, you can see that I got that kind of
sure. And I've seen it in the past too with some of the photography you've taken. Yeah. So that has to be helpful to take that home and to showcase the photography and show what is happening over there and what's going on and what's changing, and kind of tell the story visually. Because for someone like me, having never been there, the visuals are stunning too. Right. Not just the environment they're in, but the clothes they're wearing. You can see the proud culture. You can see all the stuff that if you just described it to me, it wouldn't come across.
That's right. And I didn't tell you this before, but I'm actually writing a book.
Oh, no way.
And it's really a photo book, but it has about 20 pages of content. And my son Kyle is helping me. Not only does he speak fluent Spanish, but he is an incredible writer. And so I sent him the first draft, and he sent me back something that doesn't even look like I wrote it, because he is so good. But I'm using about 60 photographs that really show you everyday life of the Mayan people.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so it should be ready. When he comes home for Christmas, he's going to come down the Cape for 3 days. We're going to do the final edits, and it should be ready in the spring.
No way. How are you going to release it?
I'm going to release it probably on, it's funny, on our book club, we have an author, and he just came this week. Keith Yoakum is his name, and he's written some great spy novels. He gave us a rundown on what it's like, and so I kind of got an idea that, you go to Amazon and, they take, a piece of it, but it's really, for me, it's just I have a lot of donors that give from 100 to 1,000 on a regular basis, and what I want to do is just give them the book, and so
sort of seeing the progress chronicalized throughout.
Exactly, to see it, to see what they have contributed to over the years, and that's a way of guaranteeing a donor for life. I mean, there'll be, every year when you send your letter out with a couple of photographs on it, they'll say, "Oh, I'm giving to that." I love giving to it. But I have a couple every year that give $1,000 every single year, and
that's wonderful.
And I've given them a blanket, woven blanket, and those types of things. But it'll be nice when the book is ready. I'll be able to give that to major donors. So
that's really great.
Yeah,
that's really. I had no idea you were writing a book. I forced my dad to write the first book. I wanted to write a couple, but I had forced him, well, not forced, but, put a lot of pressure on him.
Right.
Twisting the arm to get him to write. I got him.
Write it?
Yeah. It's a draft. It's nothing released. I just said, you have to at least write this so my kids can read it.
Right.
And I got him to write it's like an outline at this point, meaning it's probably a 50 page book or so. Uh-huh. So it needs more meat to the bones, but it's the story of his dad. And that's what I wanted that, and then I want to go into his story, and I want him to map that stuff out because it's interesting. But
he's a remarkable man. I mean, I've only met him a couple of times, but you probably don't brag about him on the air, but he speaks 8 languages.
It's bananas.
He's an amazing man. He's
but he doesn't want to come on the podcast because he literally thinks he's got nothing to talk about. No joke. I'm
not surprised. He's that humble. Yeah, that's amazing.
It's funny, but so. I want to talk more about the charity and ACAM, but I want to go back first because I know they're related, the Wellness Corp, and then your work there and helped you to be able to help with the charity. But just for fun, I want to go back to, so before you're servicing Harvard and Brown and everybody, you have a baby on the way, and then 2 more, I think, that came about over the time. But so you're starting a business, you don't have clients, you got a relatively new wife at the time, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So
it was 1984. I just come back from Minnesota. My nephew had just died. He was 16. He was murdered. So that was a very shocking thing. My daughter was born Christmas Eve of that year. I came back in June. My father died that month. So it was quite a year. 1984.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are monumental things in a life, like at a period in time. And if it's so often that there's so many things at once because that's how life is.
That's right.
It's not fair. There's no rhyme or reason. Right. It's just things happen.
Yeah, I could have just sat back and just said, and feel sorry for myself, but I used that that horrible year, and that was the year I put the plaque on a door that I paid $100 a month to rent, and I just had a desk and a chair and no secretary, and stayed in that day, made cold calls every day until it was time to go to my nursing job.
Sure.
And did that for 2 years before I got my first account of 20 people. But, I would say that for somebody that wants to start a business, in your heart, you know that you can do something better than something that's already out there. So I think that's really important that you have that there's a passion for it.
Yeah.
Because the passion is really what's going to keep you answering the phone at 3 a.m, and there's going to have to be passion involved.
No matter how ironclad your business plan is, there's going to be bad times.
That's right.
Things are going to go wrong. Things aren't going to go the way you thought they had to go. And if you don't care about what you're doing, it makes it awfully hard to try and right those wrongs.
That's right. So you have to have that passion. And so it doesn't take a slick business plan. And if you don't have a lot of equity, you're not going to get banks to say, oh, that's okay. Come on in.
Here's all the cash you want. Take it.
Yeah, we'll take the risk with you. So you're probably going to have to, piecemeal something, maybe by relatives, and
maybe you start small. Maybe your grand plan can't be now. Maybe your grand plan you have to get to there, and you start by clawing away at something smaller. Yeah,
that's right. So it was so for me it was. When I interned at Hazelden out in Minnesota, my supervisor was a guy who went into the EAP field himself, and he went into a national company based out of Utah. And then when I was still small, I had one account, I think, he called me up and he said, we just landed Kodak nationwide, and would you be interested in taking care of their 500 employees that are in your area in the Northeast? And of course,
yes.
I was going to say no.
Yes, I would.
Do you have an infrastructure for that? I said, sure, I do. and I didn't.
Got one waiting here for
you. Right. And so it's the contacts that you make in life, I think, that because he actually turned me on to 3 or 4 accounts in that first few years in the early going. And a couple of them were over 1,000 people. And,
wow.
And again, that's a check coming in on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now you have enough money to have a secretary, or you have enough money to hire a clinician part-time.
It starts to look like a company.
That's right. And so to bring in cash, the other thing I did was when you get arrested for drunk driving in Massachusetts, you have, for a second time, you have 2 choices. You go to jail for 2 weeks and give up your license, or you go to a class. It's a group class, and they're usually 8 weeks long, or longer. And so I started doing them at 2 nights a week. I would have 8 or 12 guys that, and sometimes a woman, that have either committed a second or third offense. Some had already been into jail, and they would have to pay cash, and I charged them $20. And so if 10 people are coming in at $20, it's $200, and you're doing that twice a week, that's $400. That's all of a sudden, that's a nice piece of
cash. Yeah.
And so I would find out, okay, how can I get these referrals? And I found out you have to do it through the probation officer. So I would make my pitch to a probation officer that I have a lot of skills and I went to a special program in Minnesota. I got a certificate in chemical dependency counseling. And
okay.
So I had that, and it was a nice probation officer, and he sent me the referrals, and that also made a big difference. So
you were really hands-on. Like you wasn't just selling the EAP. You could service. You understood what had to actually transpire. What had to actually take place.
That's right.
So this is a way to get cash, but you were dealing with the people because you had the background and the ability to do so. Yeah. Right. So it's like,
because I had worked in a detox for 4 years, so I knew alcoholism pretty much inside and out, and so I would let them all just the state cop had it in for me. The first night we go like that. We would just go around the table, and everybody would just really just bitch about how it was everybody else's fault.
Sure. You didn't have the drinks and get behind the wheel.
No, right. So then the next class, the next following Tuesday, and they had to come or they go to jail. So I would put a call.
It's a good way to get revenue.
That's right. So that they were guaranteed to be there every week. And so the next class, I would just say to them, okay, last week you got to tell your story. Now I want you all truthfully to raise your hands to say if you've been drunk more than once behind the wheel. And of course, every hand goes up. And I say, so from now on, nobody gets to bitch and moan and complain because you're lucky that all you got was busted twice.
You're lucky you didn't kill anybody.
Yeah, that's right. And a couple did, actually. And I had people that had killed people. So it became... the group sessions were very, very, I think that's the best way for anybody. When my wife died, I went into a group of people that had lost a loved one, and there was nothing like validating your feelings with somebody who's going through the same thing. And alcoholics all know, and that's what makes AA so powerful, is that that they know when you say that, you hated yourself, or you didn't want to go on anymore. They know exactly what that feeling is like. So the group, I would always recommend group process for anything. And after my wife passed away, I needed to go through some PTSD because during the end it was pretty difficult, very difficult. And so I went to see a therapist for PTSD, and it worked, and so those, now when I recall those images, I don't just freeze. So it's very
you can
important.
kind of take control of the.
Yeah,
it doesn't go away, but
it's
you
called
become
EMDR. It's a process that people use. They used it in after Vietnam, but it's there are therapists now that just do PTSD work, and what it is it's remapping your brain.
Yeah.
So you think about the horrible picture that's in your mind. For me, it was sitting, holding my wife's hand during her last breath, and I can just see that. And so you would have to concentrate, and of course you would cry.
Yeah.
And then they would have a bank of lights in front of you, in front of me, and then you would have to follow the bank of lights with your eyes as you were thinking that thought. So the tears are coming down, the lights going back and forth. And what's happening as you're thinking that thought is your brain is rewiring it. And the therapist will say, it's okay, things like that, some calming things. And after 2 or 3 sessions, you could actually think of that thought, and no longer was it that horrible, oh my God, how can I, go on? It's just awful. You weren't frozen anymore.
A thought.
It was just a thought. And so I would highly recommend anyone who's been through, and it doesn't have to be losing a loved one. It could be a car accident. It could be something that, frightens you when you think of the thought.
Yeah, something holding you back.
Yeah,
locked in your head.
Seeing one of your children almost walk out in the middle of the road, and you keep thinking of that thought or whatever. But I think PTSD treatment is... and we're not talking about 100 sessions. You can get it done in 8 or 9 sessions. So anyhow, I know we digressed a bit, but I think that's important.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, for people to know.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah. So, we
can digress all we want. I mean, they're making huge ground in PTSD therapy now with different drugs that people always thought were drugs you shouldn't take.
Right.
Like they're using MDMA and other drugs to have huge breakthroughs with soldiers and PTSD to rewire their brain.
That's right. And they're even looking at, Timothy Leary was out there, people say, but there are doctors now that are illegally experimenting with hallucinogenics.
Yes.
And they're having incredible results. And the best results they're having is with people that are in hospice. And what it is when you're taking these drugs in your brain, and I'll admit in the early 60s and 70s I took them myself. Your brain goes just
another place, free.
It's just amazing. And I can remember walking the streets of Milwaukee, and everything, all lights, every moving thing, every person, every car, every rock was all connected.
Had meaning.
And it was like, oh my God, we're all like, you didn't have questions, it was just all, there was no angst. And so the experiments they're doing with these people in hospice, these people are actually smiling, they're just sitting back and they're just saying, the fear left them. In other words, they weren't afraid of where they were going because now they think they've seen where they may be going, and it's okay.
I've heard that account too, where it's basically the fear melts away.
That's right. And if the fear,
which is, I mean, who doesn't want that?
That's right. That's right. And so I volunteered in hospice, and I've seen people petrified right up until the end. And it's just so sad to see, because it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't. I think that's nice that I think they're making a lot of, people feel different ways about it, but I think they're making big grounds with marijuana too, and to put it in especially people's hands that are either going through cancer or any other condition that it can help with, especially mental conditions where it can help your brain to go to a different place. And it doesn't mean out of it. It doesn't mean it shuts your brain off.
Right.
It can just release some of the anxiety. It can release some of the things locking you down. And I don't understand how that's bad.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the United States still considers marijuana a class.
Right. Same as heroin.
Yeah. It's in the same class as heroin.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And if you look at that, that was all, there were racist reasons why that was done way back.
And political.
And political.
Paper.
So it's
paper
amazing.
Versus hemp was one of the big reasons that it stemmed from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame. But hopefully we'll see changes, maybe not in this administration, but in future administrations where we'll see them much more open to marijuana and THC. So I'm optimistic about that. We'll see.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's a plant. Right. At the very least, I think you need to explore.
Right.
I don't mean you have to use it, but in medicine, in every use where it's got all kinds of promise,
right,
you have to determine whether or not it does. You can't just say no. That's a bad thing. We don't look at that, because then when you make it a Schedule I, when you make it an illegal substance, scientists can't use it to learn about it. So you're just holding yourself back for absolutely no evidence.
Yeah,
that you
for
should
federal
be.
grants right now, the only marijuana that scientists can get is in the state of Mississippi. On a college grounds, they raise 15 acres of it, but it's not anything like the stuff that you can buy in Colorado or California,
right?
And so
or even here now.
That's right. They're really stuck, and it's because it's still classified. And if it's a federal grant, that's the only marijuana they're allowed to use. So,
but you can buy a whole barrel of whiskey and go to town.
That's right.
Which one's more damaging?
I know.
I know. It's insane.
Right. So the other thing that I would say about, we're talking about, lots of different things, but entrepreneuring is that I think it's important that giving back is part of maybe you didn't think about it when you started your business because you were so busy with the business, but when you incorporate that into your thinking, that whether it's volunteering on a board, whether it's doing something like getting involved in your own neighborhood in some sort of a community, whatever. That goes back and forth. It's not only you giving, but you'd be surprised what you learn and in how you feel. There's nothing like, I love doing this because I know I shock my kids. You're going down the road and there's these guys with the signs and, and maybe they're going to go buy a jug or go buy some dope, it doesn't matter. And I'll just give them $20 and, oh, thank you, God, thank you. And my kids will say to me, why did you do that, Dad? He's just gonna go buy booze. I said, it doesn't matter what he's going to do with it. That the object is to give. That's it. That's all my role here is just to give.
Yeah.
And what he does with it or she does with it, that's entirely up to them. But if you have the mindset that you're going to judge them, then don't give. Because you're doing it, you're judging them.
And you're giving yourself the right to judge.
That's right. So just give without judging.
Or you're trying to give yourself the right to judge.
Right. So I think that it's very important that if you have a business and it's all successful in any capacity, to start looking at ways in which you can volunteer or give back.
I wanted to ask you about that specifically. Mm-hmm. So you have the Wellness Corp and it starts to do well, and it's it goes from the scrappy shingle on the door, the $100 door, to doing better. And that's when you started to pursue the giving back, right? You had the thought. So what do you think it ties to? Like, something makes you want to start a company because it's a lot of extra work on top of a job, right? To start something on your own. So do you think that you're just part of your personality is inclined for that, and then the company grew and was doing well, and you kind of needed another challenge, and you were now in a place that you could do it without it having to be motivated by paying for food?
Exactly. So in other words, when your company is to the point where you're not really worried about money coming in or contract canceling on you, and you have more time, because whatever you volunteer, if you're going to do it right, it's going to take some time. And so and the other thing I'd say is to preserve your own family. So my wife's father was a surgeon, and she never saw him growing up, and she would often say that he would be in the office until late at night. And so when I had a chance to go national with my company, because it was regionally it was doing well, and then I had a chance to go national, and I had a conversation with Sheila, and I said, this will mean that I'll be away from home. And she said, that's not a good idea for this family. And so that was it. And so I didn't miss soccer games, and I was home at night. And
I want to get into that too, because that's something that really motivates me. And right or wrong, it's not our place to judge again how people run their family, but invariably work affects your life, right? Whether or not you work for somebody else, you work for yourself, you have a 9 to 5, it affects your life. And one of the biggest things that interests me about entrepreneurship, or at least having your own shop, doing things your way, it doesn't mean you have total freedom. I mean, your clients are the boss. I mean, it's not like you've just got you don't hang a shingle and must be nice. You're Bill Gates. That's not the way it goes. There's a tremendous amount of work to it, but you do design it. It's up to you. So if you're run by clients and you're ground into they're grinding you into the ground, that's on you. If you have things running the way you want, that's on you too. You make it happen. Right. And family was a big thing for me, a big thing for you. And different times in my company, and I'm sure different times in yours, it impacts the family in different ways, right? Like I'm sure things were that you were, even though you weren't traveling, you were gone a lot more when you were cold calling all day and then working as a nurse. Probably it sounded like second shift. I'm not exactly sure, but then working as a nurse. Right. So you're not home as much as you'd like to be, but it's kind of like your family's at the phase at that point where it's understood that you do this grind to get to the next place. So it kind of fits, right? Right. And then this company starts to do better, and you're probably back more for soccer practice. I'm not doing a 3 to 11 shift, so I'm home at 7 or 8 at night. Yeah. And not going national means I'm home on the weekends and not in the plane. And so it really takes a balance. So when someone shows me or tells me about a great person and he made a ton of money and blah, 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 I always say, so what was his family life like? And there are whole books, lots of books written about men who were, Frank Lloyd Wright and Hemingway and Captain Cook. They were horrible husbands and horrible fathers. And so, they made their place in history, but they didn't take care of business. And if you're a father, you have a job to do. It's probably the most important job you'll ever have in your life. Yeah. And do it right. No way around it.
If your business gets in the way, then your business has to go.
Right. You talk about a legacy. The legacy is your children more than any business.
Absolutely. Or any if you get into a nonprofit and you find that you're not taking care of business at home, then the nonprofit isn't worth it, because being a parent is, that's the ultimate.
Yeah. And there's ups and downs, just like with the business. There's hard times and good times, and there's tough lessons, and there's, there's no one likes to see their kid upset or cry. Right. But, sometimes coddling them when they're upset isn't the right thing. It depends. Right. That's part of parenting too. But you have to be there to do that.
You have to be around. You have to be around. And if your job is going to take you so you're not going to be a family man, and you're not going to be around, you're not going to see those things, you're not going to contribute to the growth of your children, then first of all, don't expect much. So when they're
don't
arrested,
expect it to magically work.
Yeah, right. At 22 for possession, you just look in the mirror. So what goes around. So I would say that always maintain a balance and keep your family as number one. That's the most important thing, and everything else is secondary.
So you decided not to go national. Like what else? What other things throughout the course of the Wellness Corp did you do, or can you think back on that were? Because you were weighing life, not just money, or not just work.
Right. Right. Yeah. There was certain accounts that I would not take, because I knew that those accounts would beat me up psychologically. Yeah. And I knew that they would also cause me to not to question, but to put principles on the line. And so I had a huge opportunity to get a big account with UPS. And when the people from UPS came in and told me what they wanted, I just told them, I said, I can't deliver that because I knew how that would have affected my family.
Yeah.
And so my vice president at the time, his jaw dropped because he couldn't believe I was walking away from a UPS contract. But they were having me. They basically wanted to know when a person came in for counseling, which is private. It's the most private thing. If that person was on a,
They're already in a bad place to need help.
They wanted to know, this particular group, and there are many groups of UPS because they're all run by individual managers and they're partly owned by them. They wanted to know if that person came in, and they wanted to know their name. And they said, especially if it's a supervisor, because we want to watch them, when they get back to work.
Wow.
And I said, that's not going to happen.
That feels dirty.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. And they said, well, that has to happen. And this happened with a huge law firm in Boston. I won't say the name, but one of the top law firms in Boston. And I explained to the supervisors what would entail. So they said, well, tell me what happens. So a person calls up. They say they got a little bit of a drug problem. They want some help. I said, yes, and then we'll see them. And he goes, and we'll get that information, right? And I said, oh, no, that's absolutely confidential. And they said, well, what kind of program is that? He said, that's what we want. We
want to help people.
Yeah, we'll pay you double.
They're not going to call us for help if they know they're going to get in trouble for calling us for help.
And I walked away from that account. And I said that's not the way this is done. So, and I think in any business, whether you're making cupcakes, if somebody says, just put in, this much more butter, even though you say you only use this much, you say, no, that's a lie. And I'm compromising myself, and so I'm not going to do that. So you'll be faced with that as an entrepreneur all along the road. And you have to make the decision whether you want to take the high road or you want to, make money. And usually when you're on your deathbed, you can't take it with you, so it doesn't really matter. You'd rather have a legacy that's solid than a whole bunch of money and stuff.
And it's amazing how as you age, you start to uncover those truths. Your priorities at 20 are very different than they are at 40. And as you keep going on, it's amazing how you're the same person, but you're not the same person over time.
Right. Now for me is I love quiet, and so I have this place here on the Cape, and I have a place in Canada with Cheryl, and we just love peace and quiet. Yeah. And I grew up in Somerville. I mean that was a pretty wild city, and Worcester was pretty busy, and now, I think if you can get to the place where you can sit and read a book without being interrupted for like 3 hours straight, to me, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, that almost doesn't seem like a real place.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
It's
it's like that's hard to find in normal modern day society.
That's right. And I know with children, it's hard, especially when they're young. But if you work hard enough, you'll get to that place, and it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think the work hard is a thing that it's not always a given. People start to think if you have a great idea and you just do it, that it'll work. And that's almost never the case, because there's always things you didn't think of, things you didn't see, things you couldn't have thought of that bring about those the bad times or the difficult situations, and then sometimes it's just you to figure it out. That's it's not like at a former job or when you were in college or something where you had a team and you had to work on the thing together. You don't always have a team. Even if you have employees, sometimes it just comes down to your shoulders and you figuring it out.
Right.
And that goes home with you too, so that it really helps to, for me, I can only speak for me, but my wife's always been in my corner and a supporter. And that goes a long way, because I don't have to shield it or hold it in. If something's bothering me or I'm thinking about something or worried or going through, I know my family's there to support me in it. It's not, they don't have to be blind to it.
That's right. And I can say that the clinic in Guatemala is really, that's why Sheila's picture is in the vehicle, because when I made the decision, I knew that I would be traveling to Guatemala. We were building something, and I'd have to go there at least every year, at least for 10 days every year.
And that brings certain dangers with it too, right? Not just the dangers of travel, but Guatemala is not
Right.
You're not going to Boston. It's not the safest place.
And I got pretty sick there a couple of times, and it's the highest rate of femicide, just killing women in the world.
Really? Today?
Yeah, today. Honduras is a close second now, but so it's not a safe place. But she is just as much a part of that legacy, because when I decided to do that, of course, we sat and talked about it, and I gave her an idea of how much I'd be away. But she's just as much responsible for that, because she was home, watching the kids.
Right.
Maybe they were in high school at that time, but
keeping sanity.
That's right. And I also thought it was important, and if anybody does do something with the third world, that they should expose their children to it. And so I never took my daughter, but I did take my two sons on separate occasions.
I know you did that, and I was just going to talk about that. That's pretty cool that they got to see what it was all about. That's and right. Maybe to get an inkling of the feeling, because it's got to be, you didn't set out to help the third world. You set out like, all right, I'm doing well, I want to give back, and you started to look for a place to give back, and then you happen to meet in Vermont, while they're in exile, you happen to meet them, and then you go over there, and now here you are. How many years later is it now?
So 2002 we opened our doors, so it's 18 years.
But you were involved before the doors opened too, right?
2 years before the doors opened.
So,
right. Yeah.
and here you are, still going over there, still helping out, and still involved. So clearly there's something there that you get out of it, right?
Right.
And I think it's cool that you shared it with your children, that they got to see, even if it's not something that they hold on to, meaning that project,
right.
It probably impacts them, that they'll find their own project, and that they'll be looking for a way to give back after seeing, what you've done. I think
that's right.
Because I think that the showing your children, not telling your children,
right.
It always goes a longer way. You can tell them all you want.
That's right.
And you have to. I mean, your dad,
right.
You got to tell them things too, but the telling only goes so far, especially when they become teenagers, which mine aren't there yet. So, but I know what an ass I was when I was a teenager. So, sure. But I think when you can show your kids, when you can be the example, that doesn't leave.
Right. And
good or bad.
The third world is like when you get off the plane, you smell it. You just smell diesel fume, because they use diesels for everything up there, and you get an instant headache when you get on the tarmac. And so when my son Ryan went, he was petrified, because everybody was carrying submachine guns, and so people
unnerving.
People have personal bodyguards. So he'd see a van pull up with all the windows blacked out, and the guy would come out with the AK-47, AK-15, whatever, and he was just petrified, and so. Up there, to have security on an ATM is a guy standing next to the ATM with a sawed-off shotgun. I mean, so it's a very different world.
And he had probably never actually felt scared before, right? Like never in that type of situation where there's probably not going to be justice either if something goes wrong. It's not like you even have that illusion.
It's not like the American embassy is going to be there and taking care of you. So, and especially up in the mountains where we were, it was really tourists don't go to those regions. Usually when they go to Guatemala, they go to Lake Atitlan, or they go to a couple of the tourist hotspots in their air-conditioned bus, and then they go back to the airport, or they go up to Chi-Chi. But they don't go where this clinic is. It's just not where tourists go.
Have you ever come across any like squirrely situations that made you really nervous, or is it just getting used to the difference in the guns? And
the first few times I was there, I was always picked up by the Mayans themselves, and they would always have me duck down in the van, because they didn't want anyone seeing a gringo going up into the mountains, because that's when there were a lot of bandits, bandidos they call them, that would just stop the van and just anybody who was white, they
pockets packed with gold.
That's it. Yeah. So. The most ignorant person to go over there is the guy that he lands in Guatemala, he rents a big SUV, and he starts heading up into the mountains, and not only was he robbed, but he was killed. I mean, so you really have to know the culture. So for me, the Mayan midwives really told me where to go, where not to go, duck down on the seats if we were going to a particular point, like we went to Antigua, and for white people, there's no such thing as a border crossing. But if you're a Mayan, all of a sudden, two guys come out with AK-47s and they fleece you for as much as they can get. If you're
pay your way over the border,
to get into the city,
right? Yeah.
And so, but if you're white, they don't mess with you because then they'll get into big trouble. So, and that's the way it is in a lot of third world countries. And nowadays, it's probably not as safe as it used to be, I think, in a lot of countries. I mean, you think of Iran and Syria, the whole Mideast, and Lebanon and Africa. I mean, it's just tough. So
my wife grew up in Saudi Arabia, and it's not a safe place,
No.
And she's a fair-skinned, red-headed, beautiful white woman. When she was a kid, of course, and people would come up and touch her hair because she does not look like she belongs in Saudi Arabia. It doesn't look native to it, certainly. But she never really understood how unsafe that the place could be for people, or how lawless it could be, because she lived on a compound and in a very safe, almost like an oasis at the time. That doesn't really exist much anymore because times have changed.
Right.
But yeah, she when she was entertaining going back, because they were opening the country for like 2 weeks and they were going to allow people from that had lived there past to come visit. I supported her going because she grew up there and all of that. But at the same time, I was like, there's no way that me or the kids would be going with you. I mean, you're not just going to see a beautiful place or a foreign culture. You're going to a place where you're not protected. There's no laws. There's a lot of real danger in some of these places. They're very, very dangerous places. And I'm assuming Guatemala is like that. And that's what I'm thinking. If there's areas you're driving through and you have to duck down, you got to be thinking about, well, what if?
Right.
What if they stop the car? What if they pull up this blanket and look at me and it gets rough? Then should I be here? What am I doing? Especially the first time or first couple times, worrying about the kids at home and what could, because I guess I'm imagining you can think about that before you get there, but it's got to be a different feeling in your stomach when you're in the car and you're ducking down.
Yeah.
And it's real.
And when you get sick, when you're up in those mountains and you know that there's really no medical care and you're sick, and I was lucky it wasn't. I did have malaria, but I didn't get it in Guatemala. I got it in Costa Rica, but I got food poisoning twice in Guatemala, and you really can't move. I mean, you're just throwing up and diarrhea for days, and you're wondering, what is this? Is this it?
Yeah.
You're laying on the floor, and this is before the medical clinic was built, and I'm just saying, oh my God, is this going to be?
There's nowhere to go, right?
There's nowhere to go. There's no, and they were trying to give me herbs in a tea, and I couldn't keep anything down, and so it's times like that you say, I wish there was a walk-in clinic.
Yeah, Ready Med.
Yeah, like a CVS or something. But the other thing is the roads in Guatemala. There's the road that go up into the mountains. It's been rebuilt by the Swiss. The Swiss invested a lot of money. They also got ripped off quite a bit, and so they're not happy about that. But and they really took a lot of shortcuts when they built this road. So it is nothing to see. And in my book, one of the photographs is a landslide that happened maybe 10 minutes before we got there. And so they didn't reinforce with steel or anything, straight walls at a 90-degree angle on these cutbacks. And so when the rainy season comes, the mud just fills up with water and the wall falls down. And so many people are killed in Guatemala because the walls of the roads fall down. And we missed one by just, maybe 10 minutes. The whole road was just mud from the
just luck.
Yeah, just luck. And so, it's those types of things that you're not used to in the first world that really take you by surprise in the third world. So
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. But here you are now, 18, 20 years later, and you still go every year. And so, man, I can't imagine. Did getting sick and being feeling that helpless nature, does it change anything? Like, do you start to travel with extra medicine in case of
Always.
of an issue?
I bring a CPAC, which is certain antibiotics all the time now. When I go if I go to countries that malaria, I mean, Costa Rica was a country that they said that you didn't need malaria pills, and I got malaria, and I got it twice because they discharged me from the hospital before all the parasites were gone.
Oh, jeez.
And it was horrible. And so
I can't. I mean, it must be.
Oh, it's a horrible illness, and it kills more people worldwide than it. I should put it this way: so 1 million people die a year of malaria, but the morbidity from it, in other words, being sick. So an African may end up with malaria maybe 5 or 6 times in their lifetime, and that's using netting and all this other stuff. And it doesn't kill them, but they can't work when they have it because it so debilitates you. I mean, I lost 30 pounds.
30?
Yeah, and it took me so long to get back to work. So malaria is a devastating illness, and mosquitoes carry dengue fever, the Zika virus, yellow fever. I mean, just that little bug it creates more havoc. And so when you go to those countries, even if they say, like in Costa Rica, oh yeah, Santiago's a great city, you'll love going up and down the rapids, and you say they have one of the most highly virulent mosquitoes in Central America is a mosquito that is called Pulsifarum, and that's in Costa Rica. So we went into the jungle on one of those zip lines, and thank God I got the malarial pill you take every day, and it doesn't allow the parasites to multiply in your body. And my son had it because he went with me on this business trip, and he took it every day. And of course I didn't, and I got malaria, and it's just horrible. But the other illnesses in Guatemala, thank God that you will get better. But if you run down and you get food poisoning, you could have a really tough recovery.
Yeah,
and I got
or you get a virus after or in the middle of the food poisoning, and then you're already weakened.
That's right.
There's a lot of risk there.
Yeah. One of my trips to Guatemala, I got shingles. The second day before I left, I noticed this rash, and then the pain, and the pain was excruciating, and I just couldn't wait to get on the plane and off the plane, and and get to a hospital because I just didn't want to go anywhere in Guatemala to treat shingles, because there isn't much they can do, but except for pain meds. And but having shingles in the mountains of Guatemala was one of my worst. The midwives were trying to give me massages.
I can't imagine how uncomfortable it was.
It was awful. But again, those are just that goes with the territory, and you have to be open minded. That you can't expect if you're in the third world that things are going to go the way you want them to.
Right. But you probably can't imagine that until you've done it.
Right.
Like I can't put myself there because I've never been there and I've never put myself there. So, like your first couple of times when this happens and you get this illness, of course you don't plan for that because how would you?
That's right.
That's got to be scary.
Right.
But
it's life's lessons.
Makes a good story.
Yeah. Right.
You can write a book now, right?
That's right. That's right. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, back. We took a quick break. I had to get some water there for a minute, and just for anyone that notices the jump in the audio, we're back. Okay. I want to. There's one more thing I want to ask you about because you're the only person I've talked to that can talk about the full journey. So I know it's off where we were just talking about the third world countries and all the help, but going back to the Wellness Corporation, your company, then maybe we'll go get some lunch and finish off our day. But you got to build a company, run a company, sell a company. You got to, have that American dream. So I don't even have a pointed question to ask you, but take me through selling off the thing that you made. What kind of process is it emotional? Is it, what's it like to sell off the thing?
It's amazing because a lot of the things that you learn in your own business and I spoke to that already about whether it's telling your wife that you're not going to go national, you decided to go regional because you could see how it's going to impact the family. The first person that offered me to buy the company was a large healthcare company out of Pennsylvania, and we agreed on a price. And we actually, they flew into Boston, and in a conference room, they had the contract there. My lawyers were there. And I looked at the contract, and I said, that's not what we agreed to over the phone. And he said, oh. And then he started.
So it's like a switcheroo right there in the meeting?
And they know that they have a big fat check for you, and you want it. You want it. And so I guess it's done all the time. And they said, well, we just figured that there's going to be a 20% loss in business the first year. So we've adjusted the final check to accommodate that. And I said, but that's not what we agreed to.
Right. And they're like, so we did this because of course, right?
Right, exactly. Now, I don't know how many people just, because of their situation in life, just have to take it. And I said, this conversation's over. And I got up, and my lawyer was chasing me down the hallway like, James, what are you walking away from? You got to be crazy. I said, no. They're taking my life's work. And they've disrespected me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I was never in a gang, but I think, you hear that word all the time about why they go after each other. He didn't respect me, man. He didn't respect me. Mm-hmm. And they showed contempt for me. And so I could only have guessed how they would have treated the clients that I had nurtured for years and years. So to me, it was a no-brainer.
And that means something.
Exactly.
Because that relationship is real.
That's right. So that was that. So 2 years later, I get an offer this time. They came up, they made the pitch. They said that they would give me, X amount. And they said, but, we need to do this. And I said, well, what's that? They said, well, again, a little bit of the first company. They said that we're gonna give you the money you want, but we're going to hold some of it in escrow to see how the first year goes. And if you lose a Harvard or a Yale or whatever, we'll just take that out of the escrow.
Even though you won't be running it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's out of my hands. So,
but I'm responsible.
But exactly. So I said, that's not going to work because I have no control over the quality of the service. And I know what I give those people now for quality, and I can't guarantee that y'all going to do the same thing.
Right.
So I said, deal's over. They flew back to New York. 2 months later, they said, we'll give you exactly what you want. No. Then they sent me a letter, a purchase kind of agreement, and it was legit. I signed it, and then, of course, the hard part is that that when you sell a company, as much as you'd like to save every employee, because I've already bought 4 others of EAPs in different parts of the country, they're going to consolidate, and that's natural. They have to. I mean, to make it worth their while. So they'll have finance out of maybe a Rhode Island office, and they'll have So there goes my CFO, and and as much as I love these people, and I tried to save as many as I could, there was only so much I could do.
Right.
So then you have to go through the employees. I'm not going to use the word hate because that's a pretty strong word, but it gets pretty close.
It's going to be emotional.
Very
because they're invested in it. It's their job, and jobs mean a lot to people, right?
That's right. And so they have no use for me, for my Guatemala stuff, for anything.
They start to resent.
They resent me. And so it was really hard.
That's got to be hard, from an emotional perspective, because you've given so much. And you can understand their angle too, and they don't even know half that you might have given it.
No.
And
they had no idea. And one woman, they were going to fire her on the first day. I said, if you fire her, you will lose the laborer's account. And I said, that account is worth almost $400,000 a year. So I said, I can guarantee you. And so I said, as a matter of fact, I think you should meet the laborers because I think it'll be important for you. And so, and the laborers were a great group, and they met the laborers, and guys like Louis Mandarini and these guys, and they sat across from them, and they said, "Look, Carbone knows how to run this company. If you guys don't run it just the way he did, we're out of here. I'm going to tell you that right now," and, blah, blah, blah. So it was great. And so they didn't fire this woman. Her name was Maria, and they kept her on. And as far as I know, she's still working there. But
that's cool.
Because she didn't have a degree, but she was wonderful.
So on paper,
she didn't have a degree. She said, no, she doesn't have a BS. She's gone. I said, no. the laborers love her. She knows how to take care of that account. It doesn't matter. I said, well,
it's gonna matter.
It's gonna matter.
Yeah.
So, but it was really hard going to work. In these, after 30 years, and they knew that my wife was ill. And I thought that they would, give me a little slack, and I really didn't feel it.
No,
they gave me any slack.
It's really a shame.
Yeah. So it was a very
so
tough
it
time.
had a bitter feeling at the end.
Yeah, very bitter. And I tried to avoid work as much as possible. So at that point, they were already doing the things internally. They were flying up. They were interviewing my own employees, and so it was. And I would prepare anybody, if you go through the quote American dream, and you do, because you don't want to run your company until you're 85. You want to be able to sell it or have a legacy where your sons and daughters take it over. My kids were not interested at all, so my legacy was to sell the company, and so I had to just grin and bear it, and so that was the tough part.
I can't imagine it not being tough.
That was the tough part, because these people, not only did I know them well, but if they had problems with their kids, I would help, put their kids into a treatment center or whatever. And to this day, I have never heard from any of my employees.
You're kidding?
No. One, I should say not everyone, but she was gone before I sold the company. I have not heard from any one of them, and they were, and that was 30 years, and I had 40 at the end, but there was certainly more than 40 employees because of the turnover. So
right over time.
So maybe 100 people, and I haven't heard from one since I got out. So
it's crazy. Do you think it's the whole the must be nice glasses that a lot of people have, that it's sort of like the bitter resentment? I know it's a thing I used to talk about with a couple other business owners, where you get that must be nice attitude from people, even though it's not that nice where you are. You're going through a lot, or there's stuff they don't know about.
They say it's only at the top, and it is. But I think that it's they look at the owner as a guy or a gal just rolling in dough. And that I can't relate to where they're at, because, they're humping it, week to week. Though I gave the best wages, the best benefits. I let people bring their dogs to work. So we had benefits you wouldn't believe. And none of that made a difference, because I was the man. I was the man. I was going to get rich, and they were going to be out of a job or be in a less nice jobs than they had before, and they did keep many of them, but their benefits were different. They couldn't bring their dog to work,
right?
And so that was really the real world for them, to see what benefits people. I gave people a 401k match the day they started. They started on the pension plan the day they started. If you were an employee, even if you were a secretary, you had 3 weeks vacation to start. And that was unheard of, in the field. Mm-hmm. But it didn't get me any kudos in the end, because you're looked at as the guy with the money, and screw you.
It's crazy. And like the stuff we were off in Guatemala, you said they were starting to treat that with resentment. Was it like they thought you were off on vacation? You're in St. Thomas.
That actually got me angry, to be honest with you, because they didn't have a clue as to what those women went through up there. Many of those women in that village had seen their sons and their fathers killed. One woman described her son's head rolled into her kitchen.
Oh, Jesus.
When she was just sitting there. So they had no idea of the pain that those villagers went through. And yet they looked at my Guatemala thing as, he's just, vacation. He's going away, having a great time. So it just really, and if they wanted to know more, all they had to do was ask.
Yeah.
But they were too busy, I guess.
They viewed it as like, Dad's not giving me my attention.
Yeah, they he and his stuff is first, and we're nothing. And we had during the early part of owning the company, I had looked into selling your company to your employees, but that is a very, very tough and torturous process, and you're still tied to the company years after too. So it really wasn't. I wanted to make a clean break.
Yeah, I know you did, and I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, you also had things going on in life where if you didn't,
Right.
it's still making a clean break. Okay, like I'm done with this. I've built it to what it is, and I want to go do something else now.
Right.
That's a prerogative, and that's perfectly fine. But you also, your wife was sick. You had other things to deal with.
Right.
Where I don't. Of course, you don't want a bigger headache.
That's
I mean, the whole point of selling was because you were done with that now.
Right.
I don't understand
and so it was surprising for me that they just didn't have that empathy to understand that. And I think a lot of it happens in many companies. It's funny because before Trump was anything, I was on the golf course watching a match outside of Worcester. They had a PGA Tour tournament there, and they said that this guy named Trump was flying in on his helicopter. And this is years before it was even on TV. And of course, a Trump helicopter flew down, and he got out. He went on the links, and the pilot and the co-pilot was standing there just shooting the breeze. And I was around the corner, and I could hear what they were saying. And they were just mouthing off about what an asshole. And,
Really?
Jesus Christ, I'm lucky if we get paid next week, blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying to myself, I guess it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're an employee, that you'll always have something bad to say about your employer.
Yeah, it's like it's your prerogative.
Yeah,
it's
your
you
prerogative.
have your right to bitch about it.
Exactly. And so I kind of looked at it that way, that they, even though I gave them, the best conditions to work in, the best benefits and everything, I think in the end, they felt that they were being sold out. And the reality was they were. I was selling the company, and the new owners had a right to do whatever they wanted to do, and that was it. So it wasn't. The other thing that happened in the company, I think this is important, is that any entrepreneur, any person that owns a company, must be prepared that their company, their employees will steal the accounts and move on. And I never had people sign that kind of agreement when they started, and that was a lesson I should have learned, a non-compete, and have them sign a non-compete. And I didn't. And I had a couple of employees that left to a competitor, and they took a couple of accounts with them. And it was totally illegal because they stole the all the information that was on the computer, all the private stuff. So I had to sue them.
Yeah, that's your IP.
And so it was a long, drawn-out affair. It was 2 years. It was 15 depositions that I was involved in. And many of those, I couldn't say anything. It was their deposition. I could just sit there. And so I went through that for 2 years. And at that time, I was having my back problems with surgery and stuff, but I would have to, whatever. And at the end of it, we settled because I was in the right. And we settled for $200,000, and my legal fees were $185. so I was 2 years of hell.
Stress and anxiety.
It was awful. But I think that keep an open mind that happens a lot more than you would think. And so just a word to the wise, if you have, clients or things that are important, always have your employees sign a non-compete. That at least takes that off the table. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do something else or may not try to do something
Doesn't mean
else.
They always hold up either, but at least there's a deterrent.
Right. That's right. It's a deterrent. And so if I was to do anything different, I would have had that non-compete signed.
That's a great way. That's funny because I was just going to ask you if there was anything, over the course of running the business, is there like a lesson or a thing that you didn't expect, when you went to founding a business that you had to deal with, and was when you're looking back, you're like, I just didn't see that coming. Because for me, it's always been how difficult it is to deal with people.
Right.
How the employees, how it's like I just never had the frame of mind of how much that actually took.
Right.
As opposed to just, there's your job, do it.
That's right.
Which is not the way it is. Right. It's just, that was always the hardest thing for me, was that every one of them is different. Everyone takes effort. Everyone takes, I was young, admittedly, when I first started, especially, but I really just thought it was, all right, I hired you for this. You just do it. It's your job.
Right.
And that's not how it works.
No, it's not how it works. And I think that it's in all companies is that, and you'll hear this, I'm sure, time and time again. I love the work that I do, but the employees are a pain in the ass. And I hear that I used to hear that so often. But what happened to me was not only were a couple of them a pain in the ass, but they tried to steal my accounts.
They stole, yeah.
And that is a whole nother level because you have to sue because the person that they went to was a competitor, and they were owned by a big corporation, and so they had lawyers, no problem at all. They'd fly them up from Philadelphia, and it was no big deal. I was paying for my attorney, and so that's why it cost me $185 in the end, and I won. What did I win? You know, so that I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming, and so the rest. I think that was the biggest surprise, really. That was the biggest surprise. And disappointment, to be honest with you.
Sure.
Because these were people that I took care of. I mean, I really did. At least, you know, maybe if you interviewed them, they'd tell you something different. But I really felt I took care of the employees. And they saw greener pastures. And, you know, and these people that I was competing with saw that I was getting into the student assistants, and they particularly went after the two account executives that took care of student assistants. So they wanted that in their company, and so they figured that they offered them more money. Yeah. So, you know, if somebody...
It's an attack.
So if somebody calls you up and says, look, leave your company, bring a couple accounts with you, and I'm going to give you $10,000 more. You know, and you're barely making the mortgage, you know, every week, you know,
right.
That's a pretty good offer.
Right.
So I wish they had come to me and said, you know, give me $10,000 more, and I would have probably given them, you know, $7,000.
Well, yeah, and then you don't have to be a thief.
That's right. Yeah, right.
Right? Keep some integrity and get some money.
That's right. So a word to the wise: if you want more money from your employee, ask them first. And if you're valuable enough, they'll probably give it to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make it known. I think that's another big thing is employees that do become disgruntled. Sometimes it's warranted, but sometimes it's like with any human relationship. They're inferring what they think onto their boss. Their boss might not have any understanding of where they're coming from.
That's right.
If you just talk about it and make sure at least it's in the air, then you can at least deal with what it is as opposed to what you think it is.
Right.
And that goes for your family, your children, your wife, anybody.
Right.
If you're not actually telling someone why you're angry or happy, or if you're not sharing it, they don't know.
Right.
That you can't just expect them to infer your feelings, you know, and that works throughout business, throughout family. It's just have the conversations.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
It's called communication.
Right.
That's right.
It works.
Yeah.
On that note, you want to go get some lunch?
Sure. Sounds good.
All right.